Hello everyone, and welcome to our first edition of Game Club with Child of Light. Alright, so we'll go ahead and talk about Child of Light then. Did you get around to playing it, Aaron, at all?
I did not.
Okay. Have you ever seen any in YouTube videos or anything like that?
I have seen footage of gameplay, but I have not watched a playthrough or anything like that.
Okay, my initial impression, or even after I beat it and stuff, I sort of think that you got everything there is to get out of it by looking at the art style.
I would agree.
Did you have anything to add today? What did you think of the game overall?
I didn't finish it, so I can't say definitively, I suppose. But like you said, I thought as far as, an overall impression of the game, most of what you gather out of it, you get out of the very beginning of it, or just watching a couple gameplay videos. I would agree with that sentiment.
If you look at basically the story of the game, right off the bat, I thought it was kind of confusing. You're not really sure where the child is. You're not really sure how it connects to the real world. You're looking in pools with your father. Your mother's dead. I think your sister's dead. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that you find that out a little bit later.
Yeah, and so you're just kind of in this other realm and you don't know where you are. And I think until the very end, you really don't find out. It probably says it in the dialogue, but for me, the dialogue was so rhymey. I mean, it's a unique type of dialogue because it does rhyme over and over and over, but I was completely uninterested in it, and I skipped it whenever I could.
That was one of the complaints that I heard the most of, was that it would have been so much better if they would have just written frickin' lines instead of in rhymes. Which, ironically, I did just rhyme.
It says something that my favorite character in there was the one that didn't rhyme. The one that, purposely broke the rhyme scheme.
Oh, the first jester.
The first jester, yeah. Was the rhyming a problem for you, Dan, or did you like it?
I actually kind of enjoyed it, because it was different from what you would normally get from a game. And then I think combining that with the fact that it is a child that you are playing as the main character kind of made me feel like, and again, not finishing it, I guess I shouldn't say for sure, but made it feel like, yes, you are dead and you're in this in-between realm kind of thing. And so you're in her head rather than being actually alive in this other place that's dark and dangerous kind of thing.
Right.
Which is what I gained out of it, and I think even if that's not how it ended, maybe that's what they were going for in the first place by the rhyming.
All right, so I'm going to spoil the ending for you. Is that okay?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Okay. So at the end, you're looking for the sun and the moon and something else. Did you get the moon?
Yes, I got the moon.
So the moon turns you into a grown-up girl, or like a teenager type thing. Which I liked the animation on the little girl much better than the teenager person. I don't know, there was something weird, not necessarily in the in the bubble where you chat with everybody else. That picture was fine, but the movement in the world, it just kind of looked kind of weird. I don't know how to put it. But basically, you fight your sister who joins your party, turns out to be bad. You get trapped in a dungeon thing. There's a guy that helps you out. You end up killing your sister, who is a many tentacled being, dragon type thing. And then your stepmother, you end up killing her. And the weird part is then you use this mirror to go into your real world, where your father is dead and the entire world is drowning for some reason that might have been explained or not. And so you lead everybody else in that world that's still alive into the mirror where you're going to be the princess of that world. Lemuria is where it's called. And that's the end of the game.
Really?
It is so
See,
stupid.
Now, what I would have preferred was the ending that I was crafting in my mind, was that you are actually dead and you're coming to grips with the fact that you are dead. And in the end, you just come to that realization that, well, there's nothing I can do, and I'm in this world and they're in that world. And I don't know.
And see,
that seems weird.
That's why it was so weird, because if you are dead, then you just led everybody to their death through this mirror. That was it's the whole thing is really confusing. And
Wow, that sounds like the Final Fantasy X like plot actually realized, like, hey, if we kill everyone, there will be no more suffering.
right. That's sort of, I think, what they were going for in a weird way. So the story is bullshit. About the stories, though, I kind of did like the character-to-character interactions, although they came up way too frequently and in weird spots. It's like after you beat an enemy, then two of the characters would talk to each other, and then that's it. And they would stop talking. So,
Yeah,
at least they tried to make the characters more than just like one-dimensional, which was kind of neat, but it's still overall the characters and the plot and the story are not why you come to this game.
Yeah, I think Dan was kind of alluding to it earlier, but the thing that I've heard people say was that this seems like a game that is an intro RPG for children, in that the way they wrote it was sort of something that would capture children's attention. The way that the story developed was something that would capture children's attention, and just the way that you ended it, where it's like, oh, well, now I'm the princess and I guided everybody here, sounds like something that a kid would want to do.
Yeah,
I can see that, especially the way they twisted it with the ending, the way that it happened. Because I didn't get much of that until being explained the ending, because everything is so sobering. I mean, right off the bat, the very first thing is you're dead.
right.
And that's pretty sobering of a realization. And the music is kind of down. It's not light and fluffy. And the characters, the enemy characters, are very intense in how they
dark.
look and how dark, how dark everything is. So I'm kind of taken aback by the ending being, they all lived happily ever after, because I did not see that coming. Well, yeah.
Well,
if you
I
view
think
it that way,
more
but
like,
I think to me it sounds, and again, not having experienced it, it sounds more like, well, everybody lived happily ever after. We took them into this mirror world, and she became the ruler of the world, and everything's cool. Which is what you would want in a generic cookie cutter story.
Yeah, fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which the child aspect of it, you can really tell that the most in the art direction, which I think was the best thing about this game.
Oh yeah, it's certainly unique, if nothing else.
I thought the child's just movement and everything was very fluid, very realistic. I liked her hair being everywhere. I liked the environments were just so beautiful, and the music, I think, was probably my favorite part about the game, because especially that initial music. There was just something about it I really loved.
Yeah, sorry. I did really like the music a lot too.
And it does remind you of a fairy tale.
Mood in that it starts off so sobering, and it kind of continues with that, with just a little bit of hint of hope, which is what your character obviously kind of has. So I think the music did a good job of capturing that, and I thought it made for that main theme, they using it with the flute to kind of end the game.
Yeah,
not that it was
really
a
good.
useful item that you were carrying, but it was a story device for empowering people out of whatever depression they were going through.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I didn't think about that, but you're right.
You even come across, I don't know if you kind of caught that, or if you came across the blue jester. I forget his name.
Yeah,
Tristus,
yeah,
maybe?
the one who was crying.
Yeah, he talks in his poem, he talks about just ending it all as he's sitting on the edge of this cliff, which if you go and explore off the edge of that cliff, you can't continue on. Even though you moved up on the right side of the map to get there, off the left, you can't go down, you can't go anywhere. So it was like he was going to jump and end it. I mean, that's kind of a dark theme, and then you come in and convince him otherwise.
So maybe that is maybe a criticism against this game, because maybe the tone of this is a fairy tale, this is a child's game, the plot devices are childlike, the cadence of language is with a fairy tale, but there these dark undertones that are really maybe don't fit with the tone of the rest of the game. Although looking back and thinking of like Snow White and the Seven Dwarves and stuff like
Alice in Wonderland.
Alice in Wonderland, there are very dark parts of those stories.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it does fit with the tone.
Well, I would think of it as finding a relatively easy way to introduce such things to children. It's like, well, depending on how you surround a situation, kind of makes it easier or harder to accept certain things in life. I don't know. So I would imagine that this would be an easier way to be introduced to such things. But
yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting outlook, like how to deal with death and not letting it consume who you are, and moving on from losing somebody important, and how you can help uplift other people that are in also negative states of mind, like depression and stuff. It's an interesting outlook on it.
I never thought about that, but that's a good point.
Yeah, I think Aaron brings up a good point with that.
She had a tremendous amount of loss in her own life, but she was going around helping other people deal with their tragedies.
Now, I'm not sure I don't know if I got this from the game or not, but was her sister already dead, or did she die while you were in this other realm, dead to their father?
I think you died first. It was your mom died, and then you died, and then your sister died.
Okay.
I think.
That's kind of what I thought, but I wasn't exactly clear on it.
Yeah, it's not that clear. Again, it's probably in one of those dialogue sequences that I just didn't enjoy reading.
Yeah, as a poem. And sometimes it's hard to make it as a poem. Like, you've got to come up with the words that rhyme, so it might not always be clear.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So what did you guys think about the battle system?
Well, I don't really like turn-based. I thought for the beginning of the game it was interesting in the things that they introduced into it, and I thought it wasn't as hard as some other games are to me. But as I got to the end, and maybe because I was also kind of rushing it a little bit, that's where I started to have trouble with it. And I was talking to you guys before we started. I was watching somebody else play it. Now, he had grinded up to higher levels too, which I kind of bypassed enemies because I tend to do that in a turn-based anyway. I fight as little as I need to. But I obviously did not understand how to properly fight and use the defensive cues and things like that, and so it gave me some trouble at the end of the game. Whereas at the beginning, you could just kind of steamroll over stuff and maybe buff some things here and there, but I was obviously doing stuff wrong because I was watching another guy just face roll everything at the end of the game that was face rolling me.
Yeah. I think that the actual battle mechanics are interesting. What I really didn't like is I think it's, like you said at the beginning of the game, it's easy to sort of steamroll stuff, and I think there's a ramp up of using the light orb, using the slow and fast elements, the defensive stuff, I think it's a unique system, and I think it's good. What I didn't like is the leveling system, because after every single fight, now I played it on easy or casual or whatever, so maybe on the harder difficulty you don't level up as quickly. But in this, I really didn't like that you leveled up each time. I think these just really incremental leveling system doesn't work because you're constantly going in and out of menus. But their crystal system, I think they did a good job with. It's fairly simple. The perks are straightforward, and I don't know, I liked that aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
Again, would you see it from the perspective of if this was like an intro RPG for younger people, would this be a simple system for them to jump into?
It's fairly simple, but at the end of the game, I think it's almost too hard. Because
Really?
I was one of those guys that, you and I, Aaron, were brought up on the turn-based RPG thing with Mario RPG and the Final Fantasy games and stuff. And I fought a bunch of enemies knowing that if I fight the early enemies, I'm going to have an easier time with the harder enemies. But even then, the later enemies and the later systems and stuff were still very difficult to manage. So at the beginning of the game, and maybe, at the end of the game, you don't want it to be too easy either. So there is a little bit of that balance there, and I think they did that well, ramping up the scale and the difficulty. I think it was a really good addition because typically you're used to 3 or 4 people controlling at one time. They only let you control 2 with the little orb of light, and I think that orb of light could be a game changer depending on if you use it well or if you use it not so well. So I kind of liked that. And let's see, I wrote down a couple things as a reference.
Yeah, I've got some notes. One of the things I didn't like about the mechanics of the fight was that some of it didn't seem very clear or very obvious to do. Maybe I'm not as familiar with turn-based. The last game I think I did that was turn-based was Final Fantasy VIII when it was new. So it's obviously been a while for me. But a lot of stuff didn't seem obvious to me. And I absolutely hate reading tooltips. I cannot stand that in any game. And so I tended to ignore them until like the 15th time it came up and said, make sure you use defend to blah, blah, blah. And even then, it wasn't until I watched somebody else play it that I actually understood how defend worked, because I'm like, I don't want to lose a turn to defend, but you really kind of don't. And I didn't understand that because
it's tricky. But again, that interrupt feature was, I think, the new thing they introduced into this. Otherwise, it would just be a generic battle system thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought it was
interrupt was kind of unique. Yeah. I was just say at the same time.
But then, of course, the later
enemies
in the game
making it work for me. But
yeah, the later enemies in the game have this spell called I forget what it's called, but like Stonewall or something like that, and you can't interrupt them. And I'm like, oh, so you're bypassing the one thing that makes this game unique. Great.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's terrible.
I'd be curious to know what characters you found the most useful in battle, because I definitely had my favorites, and so I was.
I mean, they pushed you, and
as I thought she was the most useful.
Who was it?
The sister Nora. I thought she was the most useful because of all her debuffs. I used the slowdowns and the speed ups and the ability to not interrupt you. I used that stuff all the time with her, and so whenever she became one of the bad guys and left, I found myself scrambling to figure out how to do some of my battle sequences that I tended to like.
See, I did the same thing too, but the guy that you get whenever you're imprisoned, like, I forget how you say his name, but the big dude with the mask.
I don't know.
I just plugged him in. But the scarcity of the crystals were such, and I was like combining them and upgrading them and stuff like that, that I made sure that I only had 2 characters with my best stuff. So it kind of discourages you to play with the other characters. So that was kind of a bummer.
That's not very cool.
And especially after you lose Nora, I just thought to myself, oh crap, well, all these little defense upgrades and attack upgrades and stuff, I might as well just use them on my main character and nobody else, because I might lose that character down the line. And I don't want to lose all these defense buffs and attack buffs and stuff. So there could be better systems in that game, but overall, I don't know. It was okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, is there anything else you'd like to add?
I thought the puzzles were interesting, but they were probably way too easy because I didn't have a hard time figuring them out, and I'm usually bad at figuring out puzzles. So my thought is that they must have been like incredibly simple to anyone who enjoys puzzles in a game. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
My thoughts are that they were simple, but at no point did I ever think they were tedious. And I think there's an important distinction there. They were simple enough to where I had fun doing them, but they weren't repetitive, and they didn't like overly set me back whenever I didn't complete them or I took too long or something like that. And one thing
I specifically remember getting to one of them. It's one of those ones where you have to move the two boulders turn, and then you go over to the other side and it turns the other two boulders while the center one's always turning. Mm-hmm. I've got to that. I'm like, crap. I hate these kinds of puzzles. I usually just run back and forth between the two, trying to figure it out. And it just got it. I don't know what I did, but I didn't even really think about it. I just pressed the one. I'm like, oh, okay. So it's going to be this one. I pressed it again, and I went over to the other one. It's like, and it just kind of lined up. So it seemed kind of, obviously I just got lucky with it, but it seemed like it was set up so that it wouldn't be difficult to figure out, maybe.
Yeah, that's cool. I actually had trouble with that one too, so don't feel too bad.
Okay. Those are always the puzzles that'll get me stuck forever.
Yeah, I've found with puzzles like that, they are designed for, if you understand what the mechanics of it are, then it's very, very simple to get it right away. But what they rely on for the difficulty is you mixing it up yourself.
Yeah, you have to get it out of order so bad you can't figure out where to go.
Yep. I remember in particular in Twilight Princess, there was this one hopping puzzle game where these two golems were on the map and you had to jump back and forth between platforms. And if you knew exactly how to do it, it took you 4 moves to complete it. But if you didn't get those 4 moves exactly right, you'd be there for half an hour.
Oh, geez.
So it seems very similar to me.
Yeah, probably
Resident
is.
Evil has one of those too. Or Resident Evil 4, I should say. We should put that game on this list. That is such a good game.
I think I played that one, although I don't have it anymore.
It's so freaking awesome. I beat that game probably, 40 times.
I didn't know you could run until I was like 20 hours into it.
No way. Oh, that'd be
Yep.
that'd be terrible.
Yep, it sucked so bad.
Again, I think there are some games where the best way to figure out how to play them is to watch someone who knows how to play it do it. Like for Dark Souls, for example, if I just went into the first Dark Souls 100% completely blind like Dan, it would just be such a mess. But I watched someone else play it first, got the basic gist of it, and then moved on. So, I mean, I think there's a lot to be said in some of these games. Kind of like in this game, Dan, you said, well, it was easier to watch somebody else play it a little bit to figure out exactly what they were trying to do instead of it trying to be taught to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe it would have benefited from like the Pokemon how to catch a Pokemon tutorial thing where the guy actually does it. Maybe this game would benefit from that, especially if your instincts are right in that this is kind of intended to be a child's introduction to turn-based strategy games. Then that would probably be well served rather than reading tooltips and trying to understand poems. That maybe like just showing every once in a while how to do something would be well served in this game.
You know, there's a game that I come across that probably is the best one I've ever seen, but I can't remember the game's name. It said something Sonata. Do you remember it, Aaron? Eternal Sonata.
Eternal Sonata. I
that's it.
don't remember that one.
It's sort of an anime
I've heard of
game.
it, but I don't know anything about it.
Yeah, it's an anime game. It's but it's also like a Final Fantasy turn-based, and like this. You know, you have 3 characters, but it's really cool because it's almost like Final Fantasy 12, where there's a set area that you fight, and you can move around there, and while you're moving, it takes movement points and time, and then it's just really cool. And the coolest thing I think about it is it's all about Chopin, the real life conductor,
The composer.
the composer, and it like weaves in the story of, like, I guess there was a certain point in time where he had or slipped into a coma, and this is like sort of him slipping into the coma, dealing with the world, and then coming out of the coma. It's really pretty cool, and it's very kiddish and very, not for me because it's so childlike. But if you have kids and you like games like this specifically, I think that would be a good. It's a better one of these. The problem with that is, though, it takes like 40 hours to beat. So, yeah.
Well, that's good for kids. I
It's
mean,
good for kids,
They
yeah.
can just jump into it with both feet.
Right.
Or it's normally a good thing, but not for what we're trying to do here.
Yeah.
Of course. And it's too kiddish to the point where I don't think the art style, I don't think there would be any feature of that game that would be good for us. This one, what attracted me to it is the art style. I thought the art style, the environments, is just gorgeous. But it wasn't necessarily the combat or anything like that. So, if we were to
Now,
talk...
did you go back? Sorry. Did you ever go back after you got the flight ability and like explore more? I always wondered. I didn't think to do it until I was already well into the game. Like there were some things early on that you couldn't get to, and then after you got the ability to fly, I wonder if any of that was useful or if it was just kind of like for the completionists.
I think they did that really well, and I think it was for the completionists. If I had more time to spend on the game, then I probably would have gone back and explored a little bit more. But as it stands right now, with the story being such bullshit and and things not really turning out that well, I don't, and not thoroughly enjoying the battle system that much, I don't think I'm going to go back. I think I'll just leave it where it is, and for the people who love the game and want it, it's nice because they don't shove that down your throat. They do give you reason to play it again, like more content to unlock that way. But it's not for me, for sure.
They even had, I think they had fast travel on the map too, didn't they? Which
They
you never
did.
needed to use.
Yeah,
Or at least I never used it. So
I never used it, but I was glad it's there in case you do want to go back. All right, so overall score, if we were to give this something out of 10, what would you give it? For me, it would be a 6 out of 10.
See, now I enjoyed enough of at least the beginning story, and I did kind of think the poem was neat. I think I'd give it a 7 out of 10. For really the only reason being that I wasn't a big fan of the combat, especially as it ramped up at the end of the game. Playing in an easy difficulty level, it became more difficult to finish it, where at the beginning it was so easy. There was just too much for me, not being familiar with the turn-based, I guess. So maybe it's not a fair evaluation, but I would still give it a 7 out of 10 based on that.
I was leaning to 7, but I think the story just drug it down so much that I can't excuse that.
See, and I think if it would have taken the turn of what I wanted it to do, rather than what the stereotypical fairy tale would want it to do, then I think I would have appreciated that more as well.
Although, maybe I should just give it a 7 out of 10 just because I enjoyed the music and the art style so much. I really did.
That's a good point. The
I thought
music
it was
is
phenomenal. I'll tell you what, I'll give it a 7 out of 10. I think you
convinced you.
Oh,
I swayed you.
Aaron, what do you think?
Well, I didn't play it, so I really can't give a fair evaluation on that.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. I'm curious though, since you've watched videos and stuff, maybe let's do this on a 10 scale. What would your interest be? And listening to us talk about it too, and discussing it with us, what would your interest be in playing it?
Yeah, with 5 being just neutral, not interested or disinterested.
Yeah, 5 is, it was on sale, so I bought it on Steam, and it's sitting in my library still. That's a 5.
and 2 would be, I really don't want to play this at all.
Being someone who is so story focused, I would probably give it a 4. Because it's like, I don't have any necessarily big drive to it. I do kind of like the art style, and if the music's great, that's awesome. But just knowing that the story kind of doesn't really go in a really good direction for my adult interests, I'd probably give it like a 4.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
I think the story up until the end is great, but I think they wrap it up in a poor way.
Yeah, I heard that the game was actually very rushed, so that probably would make sense. Because this was in Ubisoft, like, indie project thing that they were trying to push. See, we support indie developers type of thing, but they kind of pushed it out the door, so that would make sense to me.
And I do want to call out Ubisoft for a minute with this game. I really do like that they do little projects like this. Grow Home was another one of these. Valiant Hearts was another one. They just do like small projects that really have they're a contained thing. They're not very long in the grand scheme of things. Their budget isn't overwhelming, so they're able to get in, have an interesting idea, and then get out. And I think they did. I want to applaud that, and I want them to do more stuff like that. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree. I just heard the other day that EA does that too now. I don't know how long they have been.
Yeah,
but they have one or two games a year. I think that's where I first saw this game, was at an E3 conference.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think that was 2 years ago. E3.
Yeah, it must have been. And then I only had the game because it was a free one on the Xbox One. So.
Cool. All right. Well, I think that's it for the Child of Light. So we're going to wrap it up here and go on to the next game, which is Magicite. Aaron, can you tell us a little bit about that, since you're the one who's played the most of it?
Yep. Magicite is I forget the proper way to put it, if it's roguelike or roguelite. It's a procedural generation, permadeath, randomly rolled stats on your intro, and you have a very set length of the game, and you can either get to the end and beat it or not. But each time you play through, you can unlock more things and more variations for your character. So
yeah, there's like permanent things that you unlock. Like every time you die and restart the game, you're going to be 4% faster or something like that.
Yeah. Keep in mind that according to Steam, I have 40 hours in the game, and I have not actually completed it once.
Oh boy.
So it's very difficult.
But on the other
I have
end,
unlocked a whole lot of stuff. So
on the other hand, there is a YouTube video out there with somebody who beats the game in 1 minute and 50 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
I'll do that one then. This is the moment where we should have face cams whenever Swick said that it is permadeath. And I'm like, oh, great.
Did you like barf a little bit in your mouth?
Yeah.
You know what we should do though?
My favorite game.
You know what we should do is we should all play it like separately, which Aaron already has, and I need to spend a little bit more time with it. But then, like somewhere in the middle of the week, we should all get together and play it together. 'Cause I think you can.
Well, yeah, there is a multiplayer on it, so we should do the multiplayer.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that'd be a lot of fun. Or maybe what we should do, Dan, is do the multiplayer first. That way, you're introduced to some of the stuff, and then maybe you could go back and do a little bit of the single player.
Oh, yeah, that'd be a great idea.
Yeah. So either way, that'd be cool.
Sounds good to me.
All right, well, that does it for our first edition. So we'll see you guys next week with Magicite. See you then.
See ya.
Bye-bye.